Stani, great to see you.
Glad to see you too.
We met here 7 years ago, I think, in the same spot.
Yeah, definitely. It's been quite a while.
Much has changed.
A lot has changed.
So, Stani, let's start with the most important question on everyone's minds. The rumor I'm hearing is that Trump's World Liberty Financial is built on a fork of Aave. Can you provide any insight here? Is that true? Do you know?
I mean, I don't have much insights, but definitely
what call you? Do you talk on the phone with him?
Definitely, I know it's not a fork, so that's what I know.
It's not a fork?
It's not a fork.
Okay. All right. So it's not. All right. You heard it here first, folks. World Liberty Financial is not a fork of Aave. All right. Cool. I feel like a lot of people fork Aave? Like, why is it so frequently forked?
I think, well, first and foremost, Aave's technology is really, really good. So we've been building for 7 years, and
surprised you'd say that.
Yeah, and it's secure, and it's really has proven itself. So that's one thing. But I think people, after forking it, and it's really hard to manage the whole infrastructure, especially if you don't know properly the code base. So they end up actually then becoming a fork to actually then just integrating Aave end of the day.
I think this is a thing that probably a lot of folks who are outside of this world don't really understand is like, in the crypto world where everything is open source, it's like, I think people must wonder, like, why would you just give away your fundamental asset? Like, what's your competitive difference if, like, you just put all the technology on the table?
Yeah, I mean, end of the day, like, if you're building a new paradigm of financial infrastructure, like, open source is the way to do that. And operating system work the same way. So most of the computers and servers today, everywhere, they use Linux. And Linux is open source. It's more reliable. It's more trusted because everyone can look at the code base and actually even contribute and find things and improve. And that's the way you have to build a financial infrastructure, basically making as resilient as possible. And that's what we've done in Aave. We were able to build something that is very resilient. I mean, if we look at the centralized lenders as of today, none of them that over the past 5-7 years were born, they don't exist anymore, because the only way to actually build something really good and resilient is to do it publicly, transparently, in a system that is based where anyone can actually contribute and make it better.
And the big moat for a project like yours, right, is liquidity, right? And you guys have risen to the top recently in liquidity. Am I right? That's sort of your biggest moat, like the hardest thing for. Okay, how have you guys gotten there? Like, what do you think is the difference maker for Aave getting to the top?
I think one big thing is definitely that, you know, we've been able to build something that is that just works. So the reason people just use Aave is because Aave works, and the more time passes, the more the brand becomes stronger, and also there's a really efficient DAO behind of Aave protocol that is actually maintaining the protocol and actually creating different kinds of initiatives that helps the ecosystem. So I think that's the biggest value added there, and I think that people have read the software and how it works, and also have a trust in it.
I mean, so correct me if I'm wrong, but watching you guys from the outside looking in as a reporter for the last, several years as I have, I feel like one thing about Aave and, your network of companies is I feel like you guys opted to move faster in general. Like, you were quicker to bring in new coins and let people borrow them and lend against them. You've been quicker to try new chains. Am I right about that? That's been a part of the...
And also, like, in the beginning, we got a lot of actually kind of resistance.
Right. You got flack for that. Yeah. Why are you supporting these shitcoins? Right.
Yeah. And also new networks. I mean, the first went to Polygon, L2s, and other networks. And the way we think about Aave is that it's just a piece of software that should exist anywhere where there are users. So if there's users and there's sufficient use case, and that network needs a financial layer, it needs a software like Aave essentially there. And also the speed is very important, because like things evolve very quickly. And if you can't keep it up with the technology, someone else takes the market share. And today we have, I think, roughly 65-70% of the market share, and we're still innovating with the Aave V4, which is part of like the bigger Aave 2030 proposal that we have, where we think it takes a decade or even next 2 decades to actually bring DeFi into the more mainstream and institutional usage.
So I want to talk about this 2030, but one more question before we get to that. As we talk about innovation and sort of embracing new chains and things like that, like, look, as a reporter watching this space, I have to be honest, I feel like a lot of these new chains that are coming along, the side chains, the new layer ones, to me, a ton of them just look like obvious money grabs of like low value. Give me the steelman argument. Defend this new, all these new chains that are being built that you guys are building on now. Why is it good that we still are just cranking out new blockchains every week these days?
I mean, one big argument for that is that in a lot of cases, as an application developer, you need to fight for the block space, and if you have ability to actually being able to build on a network where the block space is for your use case. You don't have to fight for block space and have congestion. And that's been one of the challenges, for example, when we look at the L2s that were early. And I mean, we've seen this happening with Optimism, with superchains, and also with zk Sync, and Elastic Change has the same vision. Or even if you look at Solana, there's a lot of fighting for the block space. And when there's congestion, it becomes a bigger problem. So for that perspective, it makes a lot of sense. And the second is actually tailoring towards a new use case. So if you think about something like social networking, you just can't run it on an infrastructure like a rollup even, because you need something that is more modular, and you get into transaction costs that are significantly lower than rollups and more scale. So that's another thing. And then you basically might actually have a kind of like a community that you're building around, and that maybe isn't really aligned where some of these other L2s are. So I think those are the three main reasons.
Okay. That's fair. So let's talk about this vision for 2030. You guys are building your fourth version. You have this Aave 2030 idea. What are you guys going for there? What's the big concept?
I mean, the main thing is that Aave is known always about the innovation. So we really want to build this technology and get it into mainstream. So we want all finance to exist on top of DeFi, and specifically on top of Aave. Anything that is resilient and better technology. And Aave 2030, we're building, the main initiative is to build the V4, and that aims for bringing better tools for risk management and improving the capital efficiency. And one side kind of a narrative that is growing quite a lot is RWA. So being just compatible and flexible enough infrastructure where you can actually tap into that main liquidity that the Aave DAO is governing, but also create your own liquidity pools and for your own tailored use cases, such as, for example, RWAs.
Real world assets.
Yes, exactly.
So obviously everyone's doing treasuries. What else are you guys going to do besides treasuries in terms of real world assets? What are the next obvious things to work on?
From Aave's perspective, I mean, we want the infrastructure to be available. So, for example, we know a lot of teams that are currently working for treasuries, bringing them on chain, credit as well, different types of ETF products as well. So I think from Aave's perspective is to be there as an available infrastructure to empower those different types of RWA use cases. So Aave Labs or Aave as a team doesn't focus by itself on RWAs, but we want the technology to be available for these different types of use cases that are emerging. And I think the treasuries are one big thing at the moment, but as the interest rates are going down over time, we're going to see more more higher yielding RWAs coming on chain, from corporate bonds to other types of private credit.
How long until we see a traditional auto loan on Aave?
I think that's interesting. So I think Aave will be always used as a kind of like a bulk market for liquidity. So for example, the way you think about it is that credit will be issued as it is today. So there's probably not much changes over the next years. But what we will see is that we might have a, let's say, credit institution or credit facilitator basically taking a big chunk of auto loans, tokenizing them, and using that as a collateral in Aave to extend more credit to fund those types of opportunities. So I think whoever actually goes that far and believes into in DeFi and this type of infrastructure will tap into this liquidity first and foremost. And I think that might happen in the next 2, 3, or 4 years.
So they'll get liquidity off of Aave, and then that will turn into auto loans.
Exactly.
But you won't borrow money to get a car necessarily off. I mean, you could, but
No,
like it would. Yeah.
You need to have scale. So Aave is purely like a infrastructure play where essentially like once you bring these assets on chain, whether it's auto loans, treasury bills, whether it's I don't know, mortgages, whatever that is, in a very traditional process of issuing credit. So the key element here is tokenization. So once you have this credit everywhere and you have these assets, the next step is to tokenize. Once it's tokenized and there is a good process for doing so, and you still have the existing credit system and credit ratings and so forth, you can use that tokenization to actually use it as a collateral in Aave and extend in terms of like stable coins and convert that to US dollars and further extend that credit opportunity. And I think that's going to be really appealing because you can do that cross-border anywhere where there's credit issuance.
Yeah. Let's talk about stablecoins. So to me, the great irony of crypto right now is, Bitcoin came along 15 years ago to give you a way to route around fiat. And then it turns out that the first real killer app for blockchains is just a new way to use fiat. It's stablecoins. Are we ever going to see like a truly decentralized stablecoin take off?
I think it's less about decentralization and more about resiliency, because decentralization comes with a cost, and decentralization means different things to different people. So my thinking of decentralization is not the same as, for example, some of the people in the audience, and it's a big argument. But resiliency means is that how do you create a system or like a stable coin that is resilient for different types of single point of failures, which is, for example, reducing the risk of governance, or let's say reducing the risk of some other types of issues that actually...
Like governments shutting your banks down?
Exactly. So how do we actually take those things and mitigate them? And I think that's what's really important. And I think stablecoins do have some amount of resiliency, but the kind of like the biggest fault, or like the place we need to work more, is actually bring more resiliency against the issuer itself.
Yeah.
So for example, understanding where the underlying assets are, how they're used, and as I've said earlier, like we can't really have a financial revolution based on like quarterly reports. It has to happen every second to create a better auditable system and just like a more cost efficient finance. Because like the end game for DeFi and all these RWAs is that if you had better accountability, we can actually quantify the risk much more better.
Yeah.
And over the line, then the risk becomes more cheaper because you can price it better.
And I feel like we see this happening, this resiliency question right now with Tether. I mean, Tether is really actively diversified at the moment because I think they see the writing on the wall that they're just not going to have this gravy train, through the end of time. You guys are building a stable coin. It's doing okay. You said it's like growing pretty quickly these days. Tell us about Go.
So Go was an answer for the Aave users, basically to get predictable borrow rates, because most of the borrow rates in DeFi, especially in Aave, are variable rates. So one thing we ask the users is that basically how the product can actually be better, and predictable rates are based on that. And it's also interesting for the Aave DAO because Aave DAO is one of the profitable DAOs in the DeFi ecosystem, and there's also this kind of like a DeFi renaissance thinking at the moment based on fundamentals, that we were able to build something that is public good, and it's actually generating revenue and can be profitable. So for each basically Go that is minted, or let's say that if you have 100 million worth of Go issued, it's earning for the DAO the same amount that 1 billion USDC is earning.
And Go is minted by like you drop in some assets and you mint Go off of it, like ETH or Chainlink or Link or like whatever you want.
Exactly. So it's based on the same like collateralization mechanism that we pioneered with ETHLend back in 2016, 2017.
Yeah. Okay. And how is it you all are able to maintain like fairly stable rates for people?
Well, there's different ways. There's one function we have, which is the Go stability module, where you can swap Go with 101 for USDC, for example. And also it depends on the actual borrow cost. So the borrow costs are predictable, but you need to move based on how markets are moving periodically. But the benefit for that is that Normally in Aave markets, the rates move every single block, and they're variable. But with Go, you have more predictability there. So those things are actually there for help for the stability. And obviously, Go is over collateralized by 2x at the moment.
So last question. Sorry we didn't manage to get to your social stuff that you guys are doing. You guys have your fingers in a lot of pots. But I guess where I'd like for us to close is a criticism that I hear of decentralized finance all the time, and I'm sure you hear it too, is these folks on the blockchain are just rebuilding finance. We already have finance. What's the difference between decentralized finance and finance as we know it? Are you really just rebuilding the existing world all over again? What do you say to that argument?
Yeah, I think the same argument boils down to that resiliency. So like I care less about like decentralization than resiliency, because I think if the system is resilient from individual contributors, from the asset issuers and single point of failures, we basically have a better financial infrastructure. So DeFi is actually more about how do we build this system together and are able to contribute together in a way where you basically have less issues in the future. And those issues can be any type of market movements, for example. How do you get the right risk parameters into these systems? So I think it's more about the better and resilient system we can create, the more accurately we can price the risk, and that over time becomes more appealing for the mainstream and institutions, because they have more predictability and accuracy on financial transactions and a better place to perform these transactions. So that's going to be the end game.
Great. Well, thanks, Stani.
Thank you so
Great
much.
to see you again.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.